in the committee. Oh, hello, Wes.
Yeah. Good evening. Sorry I'm late.
You have me worried. Just starting, so we'll go straight into the apologies first off, I think.
Can you talk up a bit? I can hardly hear you.
No apologies, Chair.
No apologies. We'll go to the minutes of the previous meeting. Is everyone happy to accept those as to be presented in the meeting?
Ken, sorry, I've got a question. I did put my hand up there. I'll take it down again. In the minutes of the last meeting, we mentioned that there was an action carried forward from the minutes of the previous meeting.
Yeah.
On the ambulance times. Is that going to be covered off tonight? I've seen nothing back on that. Unless I've missed something. Sorry,
it has been requested and it is in hand, but obviously they're a little bit busy at the moment, but it is in hand.
It's still in hand. Okay, I just don't want it to get lost if we...
No, they are aware, but they're just a little bit other priorities at the moment.
We'll get it forward again. Thank you very much, ma'am.
We just go through the to the forward programme. It was suggested there are a couple of things, but the suicide prevention one as well, that's going to be moved to a later meeting now, mainly just because there are people reporting on it a bit overloaded at the moment. But yeah, if everyone's happy with those minutes, then they can be signed off. Any objections? Say no quickly. Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Clive? Yeah.
Same as last time, Ken, with the fact I have a family member working at the Royal Berks and I operate as a volunteer first responder, but that's going to be the same for every meeting, I think.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
The same. You're muted.
I have a family member who works at the Royal Berks and I'm a governor of the Royal Berks Foundation Trust.
That's lovely. Thank you. Madeline, public question time?
No questions, Chair.
Member questions?
No questions, Chair.
So we can go on to our first item then, on the agenda, number 41, which is an update from the redevelopment team. You're up for that.
Hello, Ken. Good evening. It's Nikki Lloyd here.
Hello, Nikki. Good to see you again.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting us to join your meeting this evening. I'm joined by my colleague Andy Statham, who is our Director of Strategy, Transformation and Partnerships, and also by John Underwood, who, as you know, works with us from the Freshwater Organisation with our communications and engagement programme, and also Sally Moore, our head of communications, is also on the call this evening from the Royal Berkshire team. So thank you very much for welcoming us to your meeting. And I'd like to, I think, start by thanking you very much for the support that we've had from the Wokingham Health Oversight Scrutiny Committee for our site redevelopment. You may be aware we submitted that. We took that through our board of directors on Trust Board on the 17th of December and have subsequently submitted that to the regional finance team on the 21st of December. So we have a number of next steps that we need to work through. One of which is obviously keeping you and other stakeholders informed of where we're at so far. And we've got a short slide deck to share with colleagues this evening to summarise where we're at in the progress so far. I also just wanted to take a moment to thank colleagues for their support to the organisation at the moment. I'm sure you'll be fully aware of how busy the hospital is at the moment. We are experiencing a lot of activity through COVID at the moment, as are other organisations. And I think, as before, I'm just in awe and wonder at the number of stakeholder organisations organisations that are coming together through this period to help make sure that we're seeing as many patients as possible and we're keeping everyone as safe as possible. So South Central Ambulance Service, our colleagues in community, GP colleagues, care home colleagues, local authority colleagues, and a number of voluntary organisations who are reaching in to help make sure all of this continues as far as possible. So yeah, we're in a state of escalation, as you'd expect, and I would say the staff are calm, and we have an orderly feel about the organisation, and are continuing to keep the situation under review. The development and the work that we're doing on the strategic outline case is even more, I think, through the pandemic, made us cognizant of the fact that health services have to, like other organisations, stay nimble. And certainly one of the design features that we will be absolutely paying attention to is the stakeholder feedback about that we've already had so far, but also making sure that whatever built environment we plan for is able to be nimble and adaptive to changes that none of us will even have thought of yet. So I'd like to invite John actually to share his screen at this point and to take us through where we're at so far with the Building Berkshire Together programme. So John, if you're able to do that at this point, may I hand over to you, please?
Thank you very much indeed, Nikki, and thank you, Chairman. And with your agreement, I'll seek to share my screen so that everybody can see the slides that we're going to run through. I'll make this as quick and as rapid as possible, but I'm sure Nikki and Andy will be only too happy to sort of take any questions that people may have immediately afterwards. So if I try to share my screen now, no, that hasn't worked.
That's worked. I can see it.
I think it's the wrong screen though. Just bear with me one
We've
second.
got a nice shot of your email.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shot of my email, isn't it? Yeah. Hang on just one moment. Let's try one more time. Bear with me.
It's better than showing my Twitter, John. So.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, good. Right, I'm trying one more time. Do forgive me. That should now be the full screen. Can everybody see that as the full screen, as it were?
Yeah, I see it.
Very good.
Yep, I see that.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, well, I will press on then in that case. So, Mr. Chairman, in a word, the position which I think you and colleagues will be familiar with, and I'll run through this extremely quickly, is that the trust, the NHS Trust, is able to proceed with this redevelopment project to essentially redevelop the buildings and the services and the facilities at the Royal Berkshire Hospital because of the government's health infrastructure plan, the so-called HIP plan, which provides was launched just over a year ago, and which provides funding for new hospital projects over the next 10 years or so. The Royal Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust was one of 21 NHS trusts to receive seed funding for this project to develop ideas for a new and refurbished set of hospital facilities. And what we've done, as Nikki was saying just a few moments ago, is over the past year, we've been working on the development of a strategic outline case, which was completed just before Christmas and was submitted to NHS England. Ultimately, it will go to the Treasury. The crucial thing is that it identifies, as it were, a number of options or scenarios for future development, which we're going to share with you in the next few minutes, if we may. It is important to say that as we stand at the moment, all redevelopment possibilities are being considered. Everything very much remains on the table, so to speak. But whichever option we end up going for, I think it is fair to say that this is a major opportunity, not just for the NHS, and for our local communities, as it were, to improve services and improve patient experience and improve the environment, but also to make a major contribution to support the local economy at what is, frankly, a very difficult time economically as well. The case for change, which I think we've shared with you before, is essentially one that revolves around these 5 C's. It's about the condition of the buildings. It's about their capacity for being able to deliver the services that need to be delivered. It's about the capability of the buildings to deliver 21st century care when, in reality, many of them were built in the 19th and 20th century. And of course, it's also about climate. It's about the climate issue and whether we can provide services in a zero carbon kind of environment, as we are increasingly required to do if we are to address the climate emergency. And then finally, it's this crucial question of whether we can use this project to act as a catalyst for significant economic local development. And in a tiny little bit more detail, here are the 5 C's. They are essentially about the existing hospital buildings being in poor condition. This leads to less than perfect patient experience, poor working conditions for staff, high maintenance costs, and of course some safety risks as well. But it's also about the hospital operating really beyond its current capacity. It's about the fact that, as I said a moment ago, that some of these buildings were designed to support a 19th and 20th century model of care, whereas obviously we're now in a very different and rapidly developing position in terms of the kind of care that's required in our communities. It's about the environment issue and the climate emergency, and the fact that currently we're really contributing to it rather than helping to solve it. And with new and refurbished facilities, we should be able to actually help solve the climate problem. And finally, of course, there is this sense that the development of a really modern healthcare campus for Berkshire, if we were able to develop that, we could generate jobs and economic growth and act as a catalyst for the local economy for many years to come. So let me move on to the scenarios that we've developed and looked at as we've been developing the strategic outline case. The first 2, I should explain, are really options which are there very much as benchmark options. They are the 2 options against which we plan to measure the other much more exciting options. And these are simplified as being the do nothing option, in which we will be able only to address the most high risk backlog maintenance issues, and the do minimum option, which addresses a little bit more but still doesn't take us really very much further forward. We are required, when developing a strategic outline case, to include these kind of options, but I don't want people to you, Mr. Chairman, or other members of the Scrutiny Committee to think that these are in any way realistically on the table as being things that we want to achieve. They are merely the benchmark options, as it were. The more interesting scenarios are the 2 on this page, which are options 3 and scenarios 3 and 4, and there are 2 further options on the next slide, which I'm going to come on to. So option 3, which is the top of these 2, and if you can't see these terribly well, I will in a moment just expand the slide so that people can see the diagram. But it essentially, option 3 essentially involves the development of a new emergency care block here in the centre of the current site. This would involve an expanded A&E unit, a new intensive care unit, new operating theatres, and this option would help us to sort of separate planned and emergency care, which I think is a big and an important priority. The problem with this one is that it doesn't fully meet all of our future demands, but it is, or future kind of health demands from our local communities, but it is at least a step in the right direction. And if I just for a moment expand the slide and then draw it across like that, I think you may be able to see, if I do, oops, I've gone onto the wrong slide. Let me try again. There we are. If I do that, then you'll be able to see that here in the middle of the current site, this is where we would be planning to build the new emergency care block, as it were. If I then go down to this second diagram down here, this is really scenario 4. And this involves not just a new emergency care block, but a new elective care block as well, along with new women's and children's facility. The potential is in there for a medical school as well. And this scenario offers us the opportunity to grow our services and to do much more and to provide more for what, in a sense, our communities need. Let me just reduce the size of that slide again and move us on to the next slide. And once again, I will increase the size of this diagram in a moment just to explain what's happening here. Option 5, the top of these two options here, essentially involves the building of what I might describe as being a substantially new hospital on the current site. Very largely new buildings, new blocks, new facilities, a small amount of refurbishment of certain buildings here and there, particularly the main iconic building at the front of the hospital. But this will be largely new build, and it will be developed over a period of time in phases. This would help support the growing demand within our local communities. It would facilitate the greater integration of health and care services. And of course, it would have not just a medical school, but a research centre as well. And again, if I just increase the size slightly, Mr. Chairman, you'll then be able to see that diagram a little bit more clearly. Again, the emergency block in the centre here, but a new elective centre just here, and this is where the relocated maternity section would be, but new blocks in other parts of the estate as well. And again, I'll just reduce the size of the slide slightly so that we can press on from here. So I think it's important to just emphasise that each of these options, each of these scenarios, they each have different pros and cons. And here are the pros and cons that we've been trying to consider, but which we now need to move on and consider in greater depth. There are things like, for example, the so-called adjacencies, ensuring that the services within the hospital that need to be close to each other actually really genuinely are close to each other. The environment, obviously, I mentioned this before, developing an environment which is green and low carbon. The economy, developing a hospital which really supports the local economy and creates jobs. But then there's also things like compliance, considering which scenario of the various scenarios that we've got here so far, which of them ensures the greatest compliance with modern safety guidelines. Now, in some ways, it's pretty clear to see that if one were building a brand new hospital on a greenfield site, then it would be very easy to, well, perhaps not easy, but it would be entirely possible to make sure that one complied with every single one of the necessary modern kind of safety guidelines. But penultimately, we also need to consider the cost. And so, developing the most cost-effective scenario may not be the one that also gives us the greatest level of compliance. But then, of course, in addition, there's the question of convenience as well. So, for example, developing a completely new hospital on a greenfield site would enable us, would in some senses and in some respects be the most convenient way of developing new facilities, but it would also come at the most cost. It would be the most costly way of doing it as well. And a big and major question is obviously how much capital is going to be available to us here. So those are the kinds of pros and cons that we're considering, have been considering as we developed the strategic outline case, and will consider as we go forward from here. It's important to note there are some very fundamental critical features of our case which we think help to make our case a very strong one with government. One of them is our positioning, our geographical positioning in the Thames Valley, home to one of the world's largest life sciences clusters, critical, of course, in the fight against coronavirus and future pandemics. And of course, there's a lot of work going on in other areas in the life sciences in this part of the world as well. But of course, in addition, we are very much an anchor institution. We are geographically located here. We're not going anywhere else. And that's a big and an important part of our case as well when it comes to economic development. So as I conclude, only two other things to say, two final slides, as it were. What are the next steps? Well, as Nikki was saying earlier on, just before Christmas, we submitted our strategic outline case to NHS England. We are, as you can see this evening, continuing our engagement with our key local stakeholders, and that of course includes our local authorities, it includes patients, it includes our staff and clinicians, and many other key stakeholders as well. The next steps are to seek permission to press on to develop an outline business case, and then eventually a full business case. And it's obviously as we develop the outline business case that we will aim to be putting flesh on the bones of the various options and scenarios that we were seeking, that I outlined a few moments ago. And then, of course, the full business case will be the point at which we seek the full resources from government. The only other thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, by way of conclusion, is that if you or your colleagues visit our website, the Trust website, and click on the button which says Building Berkshire Together, that will take you through to our engagement microsite, where you'll find out more about the project, be able to look at some videos about the project, look at some presentations and so on and so forth. But I think as a very rapid run through of where we are at with this project, we felt it was a matter of courtesy, really, given that you had been supportive of a lot of the work we were doing on the strategic outline case, that we should come back, share those options with you, tell you that we had submitted the strategic outline case, and seek your kind of continuing involvement henceforth. That really concludes the presentation. So I'll unshare my screen and hand back to you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sure if you or other colleagues have questions, I'm sure Nikki and Andrew will be only too happy to take them.
John, thank you very much for that. That was a great presentation. I can see hands going up already. Jim, would you like to ask a question?
Always, Chair. Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions, really, if I can. The first is, are you also looking at combinations of the options? So perhaps a mix and match of some redevelopment and some greenfield, which would seem to be a sensible option to an outsider. And if we can go back, John, to the pros and cons slide in a moment, I'm just a little bit concerned that within the pros and cons, and it may be just that it's not on that slide, that the viewpoint from both patient and staff was not on there as one of the pros and cons, because accessibility and the ability to be able to get to these new facilities is something that on the previous presentation we had was seen as very important. It's not on the pros and cons.
Okay, thank you for that question, Jim. It's a really good one. I'm going to ask Andy to pick up the question around the combination of new and versus redevelop offerings.
Yeah. So, Jim, we did look at some split site options. They're not well, certainly pre-COVID, when we were doing some of this work, there was a strong clinical view that we needed to retain as much mass as we can together because of the interdependencies of services. So I think we were not kind of creating a split site option and pulling apart the core clinical services that we do didn't feature highly on our option list. But that's not to say, though, that we wouldn't be open to thinking about replicating some of the models we have at Newbury and at Henley and Bracknell, particularly if you were if we were minded to move off-site. So if we moved off-site to a location, say on the M4, the question would remain: what would we need to retain in the centre of Reading to support that to support that local community? And would we think about a outpatient minor injury unit diagnostic centre within the centre of Reading? I think that would be a good idea. Equally, if we take the decision to stay, that doesn't rule out us doing some research work, some training work, diagnostic work in partnership with the university, potentially at the Thames Valley Science Park. But I think that the concept of where the main hospital would be, with things that the public would recognise as their core hospital services, are likely to be very much in one place. Just because of that adjacency and the efficiency that brings for that. On the pros and cons, I think that's an omission from our slide, and is absolutely something that Nikki and I have been talking about with the board and the exec team about how do we make that decision about where to locate. We need to think about a range of factors, one of which is access, both for patients and staff, and how that impacts on different communities. And I think one of the reasons for talking to you all this evening is just to understand what other things ought to be in that decision criteria about whether we stay or go, because it's a multifaceted answer, and I want the answer to that to be driven by our local community and not by a political decision about whether somebody wants a palace somewhere or actually is very committed to staying. And I think we need to inform that with a proper evidence base.
Thank you.
Anything else to add to that, Nikki?
No, I think Andy's answered that really comprehensively. I think the key message on all of this is we are absolutely keeping under review the latest views and refreshing our clinical services strategy to try and be as future-proof as we can with whatever we build or design, so that we're responding. I mean, who would have known, a year ago, how many outpatient appointments we're able to do virtually? It was something of dreams, really, to think we could offer that kind of remote access. So the pandemic's shown us lots of things, but the thing I think we've all reflected on is the need to be able to be nimble and to anticipate and allow that flexibility in our design, rather than etching it in history in terms of how we've always done things, because we know we're not working that way anymore, and it's unlikely that we would go back to all of the things we used to do. Okay.
Michael, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've actually got three things to say, but first I'd like to start saying it's a very exciting project, and or hopefully it will be bring the Royal Berkshire Hospital further on forward. I know I just read that the COVID is not probably going to relax until March, I think, with the case levels. It's quite horrific, to say the least. But I just want to touch on about three things. One is, and you didn't mention this at all, it's been greyed out when John gave his presentation, which is an exciting presentation, about the London Road end of the hospital. I.e., it's the oldest one. It I think goes back to about the 1840s, when the Great Western Railway was built. I'm just really wondering what plans you might have for that end of it. I know you can't do a lot with it because it's certainly grade 2 listed. So that'll be interesting to see. I was a patient many years ago at that end, and it wasn't particularly nice then, but it's a little bit better now. It's the old Victoria Ward, which is opposite Benyon, but it's now moved to somewhere else, Victoria Ward. So it's a very old one I had. And also following on from Jim's point about mixture of sites, and I mean, Jim made a mention of brownfield sites. About greenfield sites. I would really not want to have greenfield sites to be considered, really. So I would ask you to look at brownfield sites as well as hopefully build there, try and keep as much greenery as we possibly can. And on the jobs creation front as well, which is obviously going to be lots of clinician jobs, doctors, nurses, and on all the other mixture of sort of medical jobs there'll be. I'm also, there's a fair point to support local business, and that's with the shops there as well, because they're quite important, because visitors there can buy things and coffees and newspapers and all that sort of thing. So I think they're incredibly important, and perhaps the most important one is the volunteers, it's the friends. I'd just like to see them more involved with it, because I think they're absolutely critical, because they give up their time freely, and really they should be supported. I'm sure they will be, but it'd just be some more words on that would be useful, or at least put it in your minds in this sort of planning stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. If I can perhaps pick up each of those in order. The first point you made, a really good point about our much beloved North Block, which you may have seen some of the pictures we've been using on our publicity, both the Christmas tree lights and the rainbow lights. I think it's a very iconic image of our organisation, and I say it's much loved facade, and that's rightly why it's Grade 1 listed. You also observed, having been a user of the services that are housed in that area, about their age. We know that we can't get that facility to the level because of the way it's built and the way the walls are set out and it's protected, etc. So what we're looking at is, how do we retain that estate as part of Reading and its infrastructure without being disrespectful to its vintage and its history. So you'll know, if you stood with facing the building, so with your back to London Road, there's another part obviously of that, which is the Old Maids block, which is on the left, which is currently under a tarpaulin and protective scaffolding. That end of site is being looked at for what could we do in it that is not patient facing, but how could we retain it for use for the future. So there's a whole range of options being considered for that, and absolutely being respectful and following all of the guidance around heritage architecture that we need to observe as a custodian of this important historical building. So it absolutely is going to be part of our future planning, and probably isn't going to be involved in direct patient care, because it just isn't lending itself to the sorts of hospital technical standards that we're required to operate within in that space. So absolutely, really, really good point, and we're picking that up through the next one. I'm going to go on to your last point about jobs creation. We are absolutely linked into the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce, and as you can imagine, several £100 million of investment in new build will create a huge economic boost for the area, both in terms of builders, so construction, plus all of the professional services around design, engineering, and advice that we would need, and the design of all of that is absolutely inclusive of our volunteers and our staff and our retail partners. We're looking at the design will pick up how do we create the optimum flow for patients and the community, because it will be a community asset, so that the built environment we have lends itself to all sorts of uses. And I'm an accountant by training, and I'm a firm believer of needing to sweat assets. So part of the design brief is absolutely around how can the built environment we create with the taxpayer funding we'll receive best serve the community that we serve. So the design is going to pick up spaces for volunteers to do what they do and help us, and creating particularly the wellbeing agenda at the moment. You'll know that so many of our staff are working so incredibly hard, and the need to make sure we've got wellbeing space in our buildings and in our built environment. And there's lots we can do around the design, the use of daylight, the use of fresh air and space that can really help create well buildings and areas that are conducive to a calm work environment. I'm going to pick Andy up, if I may, to answer the question about the mixture of sites, because I know we've addressed that in some of the options appraisal.
Yeah, well, I think actually that's my point on there is that we need to look at sites for this that have good access for staff, good access for the emergency services vehicles, and I think linked to your previous point, the opportunity to co-locate with life science related organisations that can create some of that economic stimulus by working with us, I think is attractive, and we need to look at a variety of options on there, but we are really mindful of the impact of our activities on the climate and the environment, and that's one of the things that's on my mind as part of our decision criteria about whether we stay or go. What is the short, medium, and long term impact on climate as a result of any building change and shift in location that we make.
Thank you.
Guy, you're here. I thought you were unable to make it to this evening, so welcome.
No, I was. It was last meeting that I was away due to the fact I was spending a lot of time in the maternity ward at Royal Berkshire during that week.
We'll go then.
And that actually leads quite well onto my question. I think that was a very good heads up on the presentation. I mean, we will not see the detailed plans until a scheme has been approved. It does look like it's making the best usage of the site in general. Now, there's two questions, which one of them may be a little further forward than planning. Is the first aspect is the parking aspect, because I didn't see anything in the slides that I saw referring to the multi-story being changed. So is there going to be work with the local authorities to basically do what they've done in several hospitals, including around Portsmouth, where basically the park and rides become effectively the only method of parking on the hospital site, which is about 80% of the staff at Queen Alexandra in Portsmouth have to park on top of the hill. So that's the first question. The second question is in regards to the maternity block. I'm very pleased to see that in most of the plans, consideration has been to basically repurpose the maternity block and move maternity away from that particular block, because having spent some time in there very recently, it is very much feeling its age. And I'm convinced in the evening you're trying to sweat all the viruses out of everyone when in the winter, because I walked in there when I was first allowed in visiting hours shortly after my daughter was born, and basically was hit by a blast of warm air, because it appears the boilers are very, very efficient, which makes a change. So I'm pleased to see that. Would there be any impact in the crossover if one of the schemes with the new maternity block would be seen?
Sorry, Guy, could you just say that last part of the question?
Basically, would there be any impact on the maternity services, basically, once a crossover between any new build happens?
So, I mean, the design... The design imperative for the whole build is it's rather like resurfacing the M4. We have to keep the road open. So a big part of the design is making sure that at all times we're able to have continuity of services for our community, so that we don't have a hiatus. I think that's what your point of how do we?
Thank you.
So in simple terms, the phasing, and we haven't shown the phasing this evening, but in essence, you have to demolish something, build a decant block, move stuff, and then it might be a temporary move or a permanent move. But it's if you imagine a domestic house chain, when you move house, it's like that on acid. You have to keep moving things around, and certainly some of the work we're undertaking in the next 3 months, which is to demolish the buildings on West Drive, will create a space on site which will allow us some breathing room to potentially create some temporary accommodation or some more permanent accommodation or whatever. But you have to kind of knock something down first and then create that space, and the phasing and the design. And that's why the detailed designs at OBC stage, which describe what timeframes and what build profiles that would allow those multiple moves if we go down a stay on site route versus, as John said, the easier, albeit more expensive option is to leave everything as it is and start afresh somewhere else with a brand new building, and then on D-Day everyone moves over. And certainly that's what's happened at other hospitals around the country, for example, University Hospital Birmingham and others. So depending on the funding route and the pot of money we're able to secure for this next phase will determine largely the scale of our ambition and the affordability of the options that we can consider. So at any point, anyone who wants to deliver a baby will be able to do so safely, as also with emergency, we will continue to need to offer all of our services throughout the construction period, albeit maybe through temporary moves or whatever. And as Andy mentioned, one of the benefits, I think, of the way we've had to review our service delivery is we've been exploring what can we offer through our other sites. So, for example, you may be familiar that we have moved a large part, but not entirely, our audiology, ear, nose and throat services off-site to Townlands while retaining a presence on the Reading site, which has freed up the space which we're going to demolish on West Drive. So there are a number of multiple complex moves. So hopefully that helps assure you that the commitment we have and are required to.
It's also bringing flashbacks of the QA move from St Mary's.
Yeah,
and
no, but we absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why building new hospitals or redeveloping hospitals is so expensive, because you have to kind of double run in order to have that security of service delivery. Whereas if you could say we're withdrawing for a year, we're going to remodel and we'll see you in 12 months' time, it would be a much cheaper big bang construction approach. So on parking, I have to say this is a record for a meeting to get to 42 minutes in before the parking question is raised. So I'm really encouraged by that, because we've been investing a lot of time and energy and thought and involving many to help us steer our travel and transport policy. As you know, it's much larger than just parking. It's the whole logistics of how we bring our hundreds of deliveries in every day, how we allow security, the security for our emergency vehicles in and out, as well as patient staff and contractors who need to access various parts of our site. And again, those of you familiar with the Reading site will note that there isn't a clear one-way system, and we have congested ingress and egress, particularly around the emergency area and other parts of the site. So again, one of the design objectives with the opportunity to redevelop the site and or build a new hospital is that whole flow and logistics. But ahead of that, we're not waiting until that happens. Ahead of that, we've been working very closely with colleagues both at University of Reading and with our local authority in Reading about the availability of additional parking spaces and options around park and ride. And I say there's a whole load of work underway. We're remodelling our cycling and shower facilities to encourage more staff to cycle or run or walk to work, those who are able to. And certainly we have a number of offers for staff who are able to take advantage of very subsidised schemes to purchase bikes, particularly the electric bikes are providing a lot of interest at the moment. As you know, we encourage staff to car share. At the moment, that comes with caveat of hands, face, space, and the need to wear face masks so that we're not bringing one person per vehicle onto site. And we've also been running a number of extra bus services, which we've been commissioning from local authority to allow a much more frequent and a dedicated bus service, so running to and from outside parking areas and also from the train station up to the site. And we've also been running shuttle buses to Townlands for those staff who've recently moved out to Henley. I think we're not there yet, and we've still got a lot of work to do. I do think it's been really interesting interesting over recent weeks, looking at some of the discussions that are going on our social media and some of the discussions I and other colleagues have been having with staff about, I guess, a renewed focus on health and exercise, and where possible, a lot of folks who are accessing our sites are trying to do so in a much less petrol-driven way. And also the big thing that Andy's been leading on, and I'll ask Andy to just comment on the scale of that change, which I touched on earlier, is the way we are no longer as a default that you have to schlep onto the hospital site for an outpatient appointment. We have around 600,000 outpatient appointments a year, and you can imagine how many journeys that traditionally would involve. And so the scale and the pace of the change of us moving activity off the main Reading site and changing the way we deliver those services with remote monitoring of patients, etc., has dramatically reduced the footfall that we are bringing onto our site on any day. Andy, do you want to pick up just the scale of the change on virtual?
I think we've probably covered an awful lot of it, Nikki. We have moved from a very low base, kind of 5% of our outpatient services, to more than 20. It's really hard to understand at the moment because of the impacts of COVID on that, but it's been a substantial increase of our outpatient activity.
And sorry, one of the other things, Chair, that we've been doing, again, we've been working very closely with, the 111 service and the walk-in centre, and it's interesting at the moment we're seeing across the country actually around a sort of 25-30% drop-off in ED in emergency department attendances through this period, and it'll be interesting to see coming out of this how much that picks up afterwards, because there are so many alternative routes now to access urgent and emergency care other than attending an ED. We say the walk-in centre, and certainly the ability to have booked appointments through 111 at other locations is starting to really help and assist that flow to reduce traffic on site and waiting in a crowded waiting room.
Thank you for that. That's very good. I'm very glad to hear about the A&E drop off, because I have my last experience in A&E when I had a baiting hook through my hand, and four people opposite me basically were in there with food poisoning, which basically was not putting me in the most pleasant mood. And the poor nurse who went over to give me some painkillers, going, "I can give you some paracetamol." I'm just looking at her, looking at the huge hook in my hand, going, "Yeah, that ain't going to work." But yeah, and one final question. Can you make sure that you do not consider any brutalist architecture?
We'll make a note of that. I think our focus is absolutely on the built environment and the space that patients will receive services. And as Andy mentioned at the start, the commitment of the new HIP programme, the Hospital Infrastructure Programme, is around zero carbon. So we will be looking at whatever designs we can in terms of, which polarity, where do you face your windows, how do you get airflow through, so that we are able to, achieve that objective of a very economically and environmentally efficient design. So I do not know at this point what that style will be, but it will be designed to deliver zero neutral carbon.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. We're going over to Clive now.
Thank you, Ken.
No problem.
Hello, Nikki. Nice
Hello.
to see you again. I've got a couple of questions. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer them, whether you will appreciate them. But has your board got a preference? And I'm sure you'll be pretty disappointed if you don't get option 5 or 6. Would that be right?
So the board doesn't have a preference between staying or going. Our position that we've made to the regulator is that only the most substantial options, 4, 5, and 6, get anywhere near solving the problem.
Right.
And that's our firm position with the regulator.
Okay, and I guess it is too soon to have any indication as to whether you might get 4, 5, or 6.
We have yet to hear back from the regulator on that submission. We're expecting communication.
Okay, and did I hear you say that a brand new hospital on a brand new site is the most expensive option?
Yeah.
It is. Right. I actually thought redevelopment of the site would have been better, but what do I know? I'm not a builder, never been a builder.
So the question of the redevelopment is it's how much do you need to rebuild, and what sites may be available at this point in proceedings. We haven't got because we haven't got approval for what option we would take forward. We haven't got a confirmed. If we were to go for a greenfield site, we don't have a confirmed price for a land arrangement for that. So again, my background in housing associations and developments is you know for sure what your land price is, you know for sure what your design is, and you've got a firm idea of cost. And the options and the process that we go through with this is, as John set out in the slides, we have to start from assume we do absolutely nothing, and then minimum, and then the whole range to build everything brand new. And at this stage, as say, the costings are in to a large degree unrefined, because we haven't done the 1 to 50 drawings yet for all of that. But we've consistently looked at all of the options, and I say those options that we've come up with, and the ones that we were asking for support from the centre, are the ones that create a substantially unrecognisable set of buildings to the ones that we're operating from today.
And just one more question. I think my preference certainly is 4, 5, or 6. Would there be a hydrotherapy pool in either of those or all of those options?
So at this stage, the design and the functionality of what exactly will go in any of those options is still to be determined. As you'd expect with all of our buildings, we're heavily involving our commissioners around the services and the volume of services that will be required. And indeed, we have commissioner support for taking our development plans forward. So there will be a number of facilities that we would be looking to include in those designs at the stage when we've firmed up the next piece of work, which is the outline business case.
Okay. I hope you find room for it. Thank you.
Cheers. Abdul, next, please.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you, John, for your presentation. Right. My question is not a question, more of a sort of observation. I am in favor of mixed sites that will give option. The question was about costing, convenience, environment, pollution, and access, etc. So mixed site will give a lot of opportunity. For example, medical college or research institute somewhere different than existing. And I'm very pleased to hear that our history will remain intact on those sites, Princess House, Wellbucks Hospital site, etc. So that's good news that's going to stay. No mention about the population growth and the diversity we are in at the moment in those local 5 different authorities. And in terms of, if we look last 10 years, what we have achieved and what difficulties we've been having in that site. And if we go advanced 10 years, because this project is between now and 10 years' time. And the other last question is, who's going to be our commercial partners in order to help with the cost? Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Andy to pick up the one about population growth, please.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Underpinning the cost work that we've done is a huge amount of analysis on that starts back in the population data and what we expect the population to do over the next 20, 30 and 50 years in terms of growth and ageing. And then we also apply factors on the top of that for what we expect healthcare possibilities to do. So in particular, what will technological change allow us to do in terms of additional treatment for people, set against actually how much more productive we will be, or how actually we'll be able to do things that would currently take us 3 days to treat somebody in 2 days. So we have factors for all of that in the modelling that then says, okay, based on those assumptions, you need 29 wards. And then the designers say, okay, 29 wards on a greenfield site will cost you this amount of money to build. So all of the work is underpinned by that detailed modelling pulled out of the population data. So I just wanted to assure you about how that, how we're taking account for that, and we've got some flexibility and contingency within that says if we are wrong, then we can still accommodate a margin of error on that. And the designers will the designers and the architects are absolutely obsessed with focusing on flexibility about design, such that you can build wards, further out from where you actually start. And that's one of the biggest challenges we have with the current building, is that we've filled in all those spaces in the current design, and so we've completely run out of flexibility to expand on the current site, which is why we need to restart and create lots of that space again. Sorry, I didn't quite get your question about the commercial partners.
Yes. Is that other than Reading University, and who else is going to be involved?
Really good question, and kind of it's kind of open. We don't. I think there is a huge opportunity for commercial partners to work with us. There's nobody at yet beating our door down. We hope there is. We hope there will be.
I think it's a really good question, Abdul, and I think that recent events, certainly looking at the collaboration between Oxford and AstraZeneca and the academic health science networks is a particular avenue. You'll probably be aware that our trust is one of the most active research trusts, district general hospitals in the country, and there are a number of organisations in the Thames Valley and not currently in the Thames Valley who we would absolutely be keen to talk to see what opportunities there may be. And indeed, part of Andy's role as Director of Strategy, Transformation, Partnerships is constantly on the lookout for how can we maximise what we're doing and bring together those synergies and benefits that means we're operating as efficiently as we can and using that collaboration as a real spark actually to take our organisation forward, because the primary focus of what we're doing is making sure patients are looked after as safely and as efficiently as possible, and that we're a great place to work so we can attract and retain our amazing staff. So all of those things that give us an opportunity to enhance that, we're absolutely looking to explore that in the next phase.
Thank you. Can I come back again, Andy? I'm sure you've looked at some of the major big hospitals outside City of London, like Birmingham, etc. But most of the London city hospitals are serving many millions of patients within their capacity in a very short sort of areas. Can I have your thought on that?
Can I just clarify your question, Abdul Twandi? Is that about population density that you're thinking about?
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't mention that. Yeah, it's about the population density, you're right. Yeah.
So we currently serve a population of between 500,000 to 600,000 for our core acute services. In our specialist services on cancer, cardiac and renal, we cover about 1 million people.
Right.
The population growth isn't the biggest factor. It's the ageing of our population that creates the most change in our need over the next 20 years.
Okay.
And Abdul, one of the things we're already starting to do, which you may be aware of, is many of our patients are living much longer with many multiple diseases, and so the one-stop clinics that can cater for example, diabetes, heart, asthma, some of the other related conditions is absolutely something we're already doing and starting to do. And I mentioned earlier the remote monitoring. So the way we deliver our services and the use of technology to help track and manage long-term conditions is going to be a big factor in service delivery into the future, and that will certainly play into again the space we will require, the built environment we need to service that, so that we can continue to enhance that service delivery. And the days of having to go to 15 different outpatient appointments for 15 different specialists, if you're in your elder years, we know that model isn't sustainable. We won't be able to recruit the staff, nor would it be affordable to continue to do that for the volumes of growth that we're anticipating in the older age population, as Andy just described.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Abdul. Rachel, over to you now.
Hi, I was originally going to ask about access and parking, but Guy and Nikki have already covered that, and I'm really glad to hear that there's a lot of green transport options being looked at. The second question I was going to ask is there are lots of staff obviously working at the current Royal Berks site. There's a lot of volunteers, and if we get option 5 or 6, there may also be medical students. Is there any thought about whether, in terms of staff access and attracting staff to the hospital, we're better to be on a greenfield site or the existing site in Reading?
No, but that's one of the bits of work that we need to do, as you rightly point out, about where do our current and future staff come from, and are we creating an opportunity for ourselves or a real challenge for ourselves by this big decision that we've got to make?
So that's going to be, you were talking earlier about a stage where you go and you flesh out the plans that you've got, and that's one of the things that will be taken into account. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Rachel, one of the because we've been using the microsite, John and his expertise have really helped us with that. And the engagement that we'll be doing at this next phase is absolutely getting into all of the details around that. We want to be the destination of choice for healthcare for our communities as an anchor institution, and access and the things that are important to both the people choosing where to come and have their healthcare, because patients have choice, and our staff, how they want to work, and the patterns and the things that are important. We are constantly touching base with our staff at the moment, and will continue to do so, about what makes the difference, particularly when you're in an area where there are other employers you could work for in the same sector, and what gives us that ability to attract and retain staff is key to the success of the organisation and its sustainability going forwards.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Adrian, your turn now.
Thank you very much, Ken. Firstly, thank you very much, Nikki, John and Andy, coming to see us again. We really appreciate that, especially during these very challenging COVID times. It's also, I would like to say, very positive that you've made it to the next stage, getting to, I would say, the first documentation stage with the Treasury. This is encouraging. I think, there was a big feeling amongst this committee that we were behind you and we want to see progress, and we want to see improved accommodation and theatres and wards, etc., both for the residents and also for the staff is very important to us and me personally. I would like to say a couple of questions around costs. First of all, first question, there was a plan originally by Dr. Philip Lee, who was the MP for Bracknell, which was promoted by Dr. Philip Lee and Theresa May. And the idea was to purchase or to be gifted land close to or near to the M4 based on agricultural land prices or something similar to that, and then sell town centre like RBH locations to developers. And certainly in the plan that Dr. Philip Lee was promoting, there was a significant part of the new build budget would be covered by the sale of the existing town centre sites. So I just wanted to check if that was being considered. I understand the costs are at a very, very early stage. Second point around costs, I would say, would you think, and do you agree that there would be a higher risk of time cost overruns when you're redeveloping a site compared to building on a greenfield site? I mean, there are so many infrastructure issues which can trip development. So, not getting the plumbing, the drainage in the right places at the right times, at the right sizes, at the right volumes. The same with power supplies, etc. That's one question. Obviously, on a greenfield site, you can put all your drains and everything in, and then you can do your build, nice and easy. When you're moving buildings around and chopping and changing, it gets very, very complicated. And we had a big redevelopment of the town centre here in Wokingham, and as soon as the builders dug up the ground, they found lots of cables, lots of drains that were not on any diagrams and were not understood and had to be redone and rebuilt, which led to significant cost and time overruns, I would say, from my perspective. So I think, I always see high risk when I see redevelopment, if I'm honest. And finally, around location, I appreciate the sort of high-level diagrams, but for me, the site still looks cramped. It's not a large site, if we look at the big hospitals that have been developed, they're on much bigger sites with much easier ingress and egress, etc. As you mentioned, Nikki, earlier, for all the critical vehicles that need to come in and out of sight. And because Reading is such a small site, I still doubt that is really the best place. I actually agree with Michael Firminger that it's not great to take greenery away, and it's not good really to build on greenfield sites. But I would like to say that actually RBH is such a significant thing that in my view we should be willing to make one exception, and that should be RBH. RBH should be located wherever it makes the most sense according to the necessary costings and business case and everything else. But I know in the previous meeting that that we had, you made a very good case for getting close to the university, increasing the research and working with partners and etc. And this sounded a really compelling argument to perhaps relocate. So yeah, those are my questions and statements. So really about costs, understanding whether you could offset the sale, and secondly, would you agree that there would be a potential higher risk of cost and time overruns?
So I was going to ask Andy to handle the first one, but I think the first one's relatively straightforward actually. So yes, if we were progressing down an alternative site route, then absolutely we would be expecting to make a land sale and disposals of all or part of the site. Well, not all, but part of the site. So that's effectively the Treasury guidance is if there are land sales to be made, and we're constantly being urged as an organisation, as part of the NHS, to make sure that we retain only that land and those assets that we require to run our organisation. And you'll know that across the public estate, so across the public sector, there's a constant review. The one public estate, how do we get the best bang for the buck? Because estate costs are expensive, buildings are not free, and we are all looking at how can we collaborate and use that most efficiently. So certainly disposals would form part of the funding strategy if we required to, if we were successful and obtained sufficient funding to go down that option and got support for that. I'm slightly obsessed by drains, as those who work with me will know. So we have all sorts of drains on our lovely site at the moment. One of the things we have been successful in doing, and it might sound like a minor thing, but it's actually huge. We were able to get drawdown funding for de-steaming the site. So any of you who've seen the New York movies with the steam coming up from underground, many large public buildings, as you may be aware, are fed by, it was quite a vogue at one point, is central steam plant, and all these, you'll see the tracks across the site where the snow never falls because there's so much heat being lost through the heating pipes. But we're de-steaming the site at the moment, which is going to remove around 3 miles of pipework from underground and enable us to have much more energy efficient boilers and much more controllable heat into each building. So that will be a big part of de-risking the underground nature of the site, because that plant at the moment has been in there for decades and is in various states of disrepair. So part of the getting us to a point where we could make a decision on what option to go for is helping us with that. So de-steaming the site will help de-risk the underground thing that we would find if we dug down. And as you'd know, again from your development background, you know that we would be properly and fully surveying any prospective build site as part of the appraisal as to whether that was a viable construction site or not. The site does look cramped on those diagrams, and one of the questions with all of the hospital redevelopments is about massing. So you'll know from the central London hospitals that land is even more scarce than around here, and therefore you build up. And certainly one of the most expensive options for building, whether it's domestic homes or hospitals, is lots of single-storey buildings with acres and acres of roof. So one of the cost determinants for us in any development that we look at, whether it's a rebuild on a new site or redeveloping our own, is the extent to which we can build up and mass those buildings, because that has a big impact on how well we can use the site and how much traffic routes it leaves space for in between the buildings. So that's a huge consideration as part of the design.
Thank you very much for your answers. And I wish you well with your project.
We're really excited about it. It's a once in a generation opportunity, and we're really keen to keep, your organisation and you as colleagues. I mean, I think of you as colleagues and stakeholders in this. We all want to do the right thing and do the best thing we can for this community, and to make sure we get the best possible backing from central government and anyone else to take this from a plan on a page to reality.
Thank you for that question, Adrian. We're going to go to last question from Jim Fruin.
Thank you. I'll be very quick because I already have one go. A couple of very points. Firstly, congratulations, Guy, on the family expansion that you mentioned earlier. Well done. Timescales. There's a couple of things that COVID has provided us with, some very good examples of how, as a country and a set of organisations, we can work very, very quickly. And it's also provided examples of where we continue to move very, very slowly. So can you just give us a view of the timescales of this? And are we in the new world of moving quickly, or the old world of having to dot I's, cross T's and keep going for years and years and years?
Okay, I think there's several aspects to your question, Jim. It's a really good point. As a taxpayer, as we are, I think all of us would want to be assured that any use of our taxpayer funds are being carefully stewarded and wisely spent. And so, Project Speed has been launched by the Centre, so by Treasury and by Department of Health, Social Care, NHS England, to make sure that all of the economies of scale, so repeatable designs, modern methods of construction, so manufacturing off-site, because we know that's cheaper and more effective, and it shortens the construction time by many months, if not years. All of these things are going to be deployed, and we've got our first meeting at the end of January with the Project Speed team and the new hospital director, who's the former CEO of Chase Farm Trust, who is the newly appointed ex-chief exec, who's leading the hospital build programme, and we're really supportive and keen that every single penny of taxpayer funds that are available will end up in a very efficient build programme, a short build programme, and one that we know that we can deliver. So yes, absolutely, there are huge changes afoot in the way that hospitals will be constructed because of the hospital infrastructure, hospital improvement programme, and the recognition that to be building 40 hospitals in a relatively short period of time will require a collaborative and centralised support, rather than each individual organisation going out to market with very, very bespoke and different things. I mean, the simple example I can give is, rules around the carbon neutral design protocols, those can be developed centrally. The spaces that are required around beds for a modern hospital environment, again, you haven't got every organisation needing to invent its own rules on that, and all of the hospital technical manuals and guidance around what air changes you need in an orthopaedic theatre, or what air changes you need in a waiting room, those are all centrally determined, and it makes it much more straightforward for designers if that's all agreed. So I'm optimistic that we will be helped and assisted by that approach from the centre, and certainly the hospitals that are ahead of us on the programme haven't had the benefit of that. They're further on with their designs, and many have spades in the ground. So I think the timing is great for us with that. Andy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that. We're just really excited. The timing is great for us.
That is really good to hear. And I know on this call tonight there's some people from other parts of the NHS, but once again, I know that shouldn't have to be said, but it does. Just pass on our thanks to all those working at the RBH. I dip my toes in once a week to volunteer. The work they're doing is just absolutely brilliant. So pass on our thanks to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, if I may, can I just end with a request? We have a number of people on the call this evening. You've all got families, neighbours, communities and colleagues and people that you influence. more than ever before, I do really need to ask for your help. And I always come to your committee and ask for help. Last time it was around support for the SOC. The hands, face space, the social distancing. If everyone on this call is able to influence 5, 10 or more people to really stick to that. We are rolling out vaccines that will provide a degree of protection, not immediately, but in due course. The most effective way, this virus cannot spread unless we allow it. So if you keep social distancing, you wash your hands after every time you touch anything, and you wear face coverings when you're out and about, we will stop this virus spreading. And that's really the message, I think, from all of our community and the other organisations that we work so closely with, is please could you help us by keeping that message going and adhering to that in the community that you circulate in, because if we all do this together, we will be able to restrict the spread of this disease.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Certainly, I'm sure we will. I've never been able to influence anyone, but I'll certainly give it a go, see if I can get some people to do it. We're quite well behaved in Wokingham, so hopefully we'll be on a good show. Thank you. Hey, thank you very much for your time on this. It's been very useful, as it was last time. Please keep us in mind as you move along. Try not to get too busy that you can't come back to us when you've got something to present. It's been very enjoyable. Thank you for your time, and stay safe. There's the message for the evening, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, one last thing. The other message I must say is we are really keen that if anyone, again, the messaging is important. We are open for business. So if anyone has unexpected lumps, unexplained bleeding, pain that won't go away, please don't think you'll be a trouble to us to come in and get it sorted. We are open and we want to see people, and the earlier we can intervene and do diagnostics and get folks started on treatment, the better the outcomes. So we're really trying to message through all of the media, and I will continue to abuse your generosity with time to get that message across, because we just want to make sure that we are a national health service. We're open for many conditions and diseases, not just COVID, even though if you watch the news at the moment, you'll think that's all we do. We're open for so many more things. And, as we've heard from a colleague on the call this evening, babies are still being born, cancers are still being treated, dialysis is still happening, and imaging is still going ahead, and many other services are still running. So thank you so much for all your support, and I will stop talking now, but thank you.
Ken, hi, it's Debbie Milligan, GP lead from Wokingham CCG. Can I just come up on the back of what Nikki said? Just to clarify, yes, the Royal Berks is doing everything they can to support everybody that has other illness apart from COVID. If any of your colleagues, friends, family, whoever are concerned about anything, any changes, please don't go to the Royal Berks first. If you contact your GP, we will get you to the right place. A lot of this work is being done remotely and very safe. The Royal Berks has segregated the areas in the hospital, so we are keeping people as safe as possible. So if you need us, contact us. Don't fret at home and worry.
Hey, there we go. Everyone's asking us to contact them now. This is quite good. Where does 101 fit in with this? I mean, I must admit, if I had a sort of minor medical emergency, I wouldn't necessarily dial my GP straight away. I would normally dial 101.
Please don't. That's the police. 101 is the police service, so you might get short shift. It's 111. Easy mistake. So yes, you can ring 111. Some people prefer ringing them first because they don't want to bother the GP. We don't mind in general practice whether you ring us first or ring 111. The national message is actually, if you can, use 111 online, because understandably the 111 service are as call handlers in big areas, and some of them sadly have had outbreaks. We are lucky at the moment with South Central Ambulance, our service is fully running, but the number of calls that are coming through are quite significantly higher than they normally are. So 111 online, ideally, and as Nikki said earlier, particularly if you're thinking, do I need to go in to A&E, the 111 first service. If you do need to be seen in ED or at a urgent treatment centre, we now have the facility for a clinician to book you an appointment, which again is keeping you safe. You won't be, waiting in a queue with lots of other people. We're booking appointments, again, to keep you safe, like we are in general practice as well.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Yes, again, thank you very much for that presentation. It was very welcome. And I hope to see you again too. You may escape if you wish, or you can sit around on the meeting, whatever you'd like to do the most. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
We're going to move on.
Thank you.
We're going to move on now to our next item. Now, I was going to move one around, but we've got Katie Summers and Caroline Tack already here, haven't we? Yes.
Yeah.
Would you like to do your presentation now?
Yeah, that's fine. So welcome everybody. I'm Katie Summers. I'm from Berkshire West CCG. I have come to this meeting before. I think some people may have remembered me. So I'm the Director of Operations for the Woking locality. We're joined today by Dr. Debbie Milligan. And Debbie Milligan is going to take us through the actual approach that we're doing at the moment for commissioning hydrotherapy services. You have received the papers prior to this meeting, so I'm hoping it's going to be more of a conversation piece rather than literally a talking show. But Debbie can literally take us through some updates that we have been taken forward at the moment. One thing to just before hand over, Ken, one thing we do know that is you may have received today, but Dr. James Kent was supposed to be sending out a letter to all of the host chairs. We're not too sure whether or not that has gone out to you today or not. So whatever James is actually putting in that conversation, this is basically the outcomes from the actual decisions that the CCG has made. So just make you clear on that, Ken.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, over to you, Debbie.
Thank you. I'm not going to have my camera on because I live in Finchampstead and the internet is dropping every 5 seconds. So, as you're probably aware, the provision of hydrotherapy has been in discussion for many years, really, and is being closed on multiple occasions due to ongoing maintenance issues. And obviously, with the advent of COVID, it's actually been closed for many months now due to the heightened interpersonal contact risks associated with the service. So just to give some background, the CCG commissions the physiotherapy service within the Royal Berks. And hydrotherapy is just one part of the physiotherapy contract. Obviously, there's land-based and what most of you probably know if you've ever attended a physio. So we decided to run a consultation, really to gain the opinion and understand the different perspectives in order to form a decision about the hydrotherapy service. This is the first time that a public consultation has been undertaken, and the scope is really purely on the hydrotherapy services for NHS funded patients. We're aware that obviously the Royal Berks has multiple private companies that and voluntary groups that use their pool, but we weren't looking at that. It was purely looking at the role of hydrotherapy for our NHS patients. So in the consultation, and forgive me if you've read it and you know this in depth, but we're basically looking at 6 principles, and that's to offer procedures and treatments consistently and fairly to patients, to ensure that services meet the latest national guidance and are supported robustly with clinical evidence, to review the use of treatments that do not have any benefit or limited evidence, to prioritise treatments which provide the greatest benefit to patients, to ensure best value for money, and as always, to provide the right services at the right time to the right place for those patients, ideally closer to home. So it was quite a large consultation that ran for 8 weeks from the 10th of August to the 2nd of November. We had multiple communications through different networks. We used your unitary networks and resident and parish council newsletters. The Health Watch organisations, voluntary sectors, our PPGs were involved. And we had quite a big response. We had 498 individual responses with 9 written organisational responses. It was quite interesting reviewing some of those reports, and if you want further details, Caroline can fill you in some of those details. But of the 498, only 217 were identified as using the NHS service, and only 59 of those were NHS patients who had been prescribed hydrotherapy. And just to make it clear, GPs can't refer into hydrotherapy. The only people who can decide whether a patient should try hydrotherapy currently is either the physios working at the Royal Berks or consultants at the Royal Berks. So from the consultation responses, there was the absolute recognition that, those people that were using the service, did find these things beneficial. However, when we looked at all the evidence we could find, then the clinical effectiveness over land-based therapy was either absent or weak for the majority of patients. And obviously, with our duty to continually ensure that NHS resources are used appropriately, we did have to look at this service. So in conclusion, we felt that we no longer would routinely fund hydrotherapy service for NHS patients due to the very limited clinical evidence. However, we did decide that there are always exceptions to the rule. And because of this, we felt as though we would implement an IFR process. So this is a process where clinicians, in this case, it would be obviously consultants to the Royal Berks, if they felt their patient absolutely required hydrotherapy, then they can apply for individual funding for that patient to still proceed with hydrotherapy. So currently the CCG is on the back of that looking for alternate pools within Berkshire West and the surrounding areas to ensure that those who clinically need the hydrotherapy still have access to such a service. I think personally, when we had our public board meeting, it was really supported that the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists were really keen to work with the CCG to develop the clinical criteria for hydrotherapy. And I think it's great to have that, that strong board behind us to make sure that the right people get the right treatment at the right time.
Okay, how would you like us to proceed with this? Shall we go straight into questions, or are there any other areas you'd like to come clear with? Or
Katie, Caroline, is there anything you want to add?
No, I don't think. I think given time, I think actually Debbie's done a really good overview there. You've got a lot of details in your papers already. So I think actually it's just worth opening up to questions, Chair.
Okay, I think that'll work well.
Yeah.
I've got a whole string of questions that I'd like to ask, but I'm going to let everyone else go first because my list normally vanishes then. Adrian, we'll start with you, please. Adrian, are you there?
Apologies, I forgot to click the button. It sounds like this is going in one direction. This discussion to close this hydrotherapy. One of the things that I spent my whole life working on the outskirts of finance and IT. So one thing that I'm always concerned about is cost. cost per patient, etc., etc. We see that I think the total annual cost is 240k a year across roughly 300 patients, which is about £1,000 a year. To be honest, I think I don't know what the CCG budget is, maybe 200 million a year, I don't know. But this is from my perspective, this is peanuts, really. I've seen some very dramatic cases where individual, I would say, children with many multiple issues have been taken care for at a rough cost of 1 million per year. So this is, considerably less than some of the really distressing cases that we see of children with multiple issues. So that's one aspect that I'm not happy with. This is a small amount of money, really. I understand, it's closed, it's COVID. COVID is an extraordinary situation. And I think, however, I would say we do need to remember that at some point we will make progress with COVID, with vaccines, etc., etc. And the world will gradually, maybe over the next 2 years or whatever, return to normal. Now, when we return to normal, what are we going to face? And we've already had this from Nikki in our meeting, to be quite frank. We are going to be faced with a massively ageing population. We have, in Woking Borough, a huge number of people in their 80s. We have quite a sizable portion of people over 100. And I would suggest that people, when they get into a very old age, something like hydrotherapy, where the weight of the body can be taken by the water, is particularly pertinent. However, I will stick to the questions which make sense to me at this point. Okay, if we're going to stop spending 240k a year, I'd like to know all the other numbers around this. So number one is what are the decommissioning costs? What would that look like in terms of a number? Let's say in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, we want to recommission this service. What would be the cost of recommissioning or going to another site? What are these cost elements looking like? I'm not suggesting that we make all the health decisions purely on a cost basis, but I would like to understand the financial context to these decisions that are made.
Debbie, do you want me to answer, or?
Yeah, that would be good. The only thing I would say is, we are not saying as the CCG that there will be no hydrotherapy, which is why we are actively looking at other sites for this. And certainly hydrotherapy is part of the whole cost envelope for physiotherapy at the Royal Berks. So, that money isn't being taken away from the Royal Berks. That money will still be there. It just be used obviously differently for their NHS patients. Katie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Adrian, I hear you there. My husband's a physiotherapist as well, so I know exactly where you're coming from. We are not decommissioning hydrotherapy services at all here. What we're saying is that we want to continue offering hydrotherapy services. The Royal Berks, the issue for us at the moment is, and you heard it from Nikki, their estate is actually they need to redevelop their sites. So we've got to be able to think about how do we support maintaining hydrotherapy services to the most clinically appropriate people and actually providing them in that continuation period. So at the moment, what is happening is that the actual CCG is going out. We're looking at loads of different venues and sites and where we could also offer this. You heard at the very beginning the issues that we've also heard is that one of the big factors is the estate at the Royal Berks, it's constantly having to not provide the service, and we don't want that. These people need that service. There is really some evidence to definitely show that actually certain groups of people do get the benefits of having that water-based types of therapy, and that's what we're focusing on. So actually, what we will be doing, and I'm hoping this is the thing that Caroline is overseeing for us, one thing we were doing is we're scoping out across the whole of our footprint in Wokingham, Reading and all West Berkshire. Are there any sites that are already set up that actually we can organise and support a hydrotherapy facility in? So we're not decommissioning, we're not recommissioning, we're wanting to maintain the service. And I think the support that we have with the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy really helps us be very clear on what they would advise us as what types of facilities they would deem to be the most safe from a patient perspective. So I hope that, Adrian, that gives you a lot more reassurance.
It does give me a certain level of reassurance. I really appreciate your comments and answers. Thank you very much.
Right. Clive, you're next.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much for the presentation about the hydrotherapy pool. I know it's a pretty old pool and it is very costly to maintain, but I think we have to remember that this pool was provided for by public subscription. I think that people put their hands in their pockets 20, 30 years ago to make sure that this pool could be provided. And I think I didn't expect to hear you saying that this was not decommissioning hydrotherapy. I was very pleased that you have said that you're not doing that. It's just maybe not using this pool, but we are looking for somewhere else. And I think we've got to encourage you definitely to find somewhere else. I think it's really good that you're talking to the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists, because I think that they will change the assumption that you've made here that there isn't much clinical evidence that hydrotherapy is much better than land-based treatment. Physiotherapists that I've talked to don't agree with you. And you probably had some conversations with your husband, and I'm sure he doesn't actually agree with you. But that might be what the survey found. But I think that the actual clinicians that are doing the treatment are going to say, no, that's not actually right. Hydrotherapy does do a tremendous amount for somebody. People who have difficulty with movement and that sort of thing, this actually transforms them where drugs actually don't do.
Yes.
And I think, yeah.
So I think, I am pleased that you're saying that the provision is not going to be decommissioned, that we will find somewhere, and hopefully it will be around the central Reading area. Where, I don't know. I would be interested to know how individual funding can be applied for, and whether there would be any limit set on that by West Berks CCG. I would hope that there wouldn't be a limit.
No. So no. I'll answer that. So two things, Clive. You're absolutely right. From the reviews we got, those people who use it really do find it very beneficial, and that's why we were keen to say, if the consultant feels that this is the right thing for the patient, they apply for funding. So the patient, the consultant, basically write to CCG with with the strong case of the reasoning why, and it is under review. So it may be that the CCG say, yep, that's great, well, let's do this for X amount of time, and then the consultant would kind of, if they feel as though they need more sessions and the reasoning why, then it's reviewed again. But it's done on an individual basis, so that we can support the individual patient rather than just be blanket about what's provided for everybody.
Can I just jump in there, because you've said that if the consultant says that this is necessary, then an application can be made. I would urge you to change that to if the consultant or
yes,
that was
a slip of the tongue. It's the clinician.
Yeah, because I do know that there is sometimes conflict between physios and consultants, and from my experience, the physio possibly knows better.
Yes, yeah, that was an omission. I do apologise.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to go, Clive, just on the point of the clinical evidence, at our governing board, we had a member of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy there, and they commented on the clinical evidence, and they've said it is such a shame there isn't necessarily that strong clinical evidence base at the moment. There needs to be a lot more research behind it. We are an NHS that is evidence-based, and unless we've got that research and the evidence, sometimes it's very hard for us as commissioners to make the how we get that. And so the way that you get that is by doing the research. So I think there's a bit of a two-way piece here in the fact that what we'll be saying to the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, help us, can you do the research, get the evidence for us, because that will help us then put the case forward. We can actually get even more greater evidence to understand what types of individual people need to be put through the service. So,
okay, thanks very much.
Could I just come in on that point, Katie and Debbie? Hi, sorry, my name is Caroline Tack. I work for the CCG, also colleagues of Katie and Debbie. Just to say that we actually met with the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists today, and they are going to do exactly that piece of work for us, and they're coming back to us by the middle of February to work with our clinical effectiveness team on developing the criteria for hydrotherapy. So they're really keen to be involved. And probably just to add also, with them joining us are also the Aquatic Therapy Association, who are working with us on criteria about which pools we should be using for hydrotherapy to ensure that they meet the correct standards for provision. So hopefully that will give some level of assurance as well.
Right. If the Chartered Society of Physios come back with this information, I think you said by the middle of February, and it is overwhelming in favour of hydrotherapy pools, and you can't find anywhere else, will you then find the money to upgrade the pool that is in the Royal Berks?
So if there is a strong evidence base there, then actually that evidence base will actually be put forward to the Royal Berks in their business case that they're doing, the outline business case, to say there's justification now, you need to put into your actual business case for a dedicated hydrotherapy. So it all fit into the big picture, if you get me, Clive, from that perspective. So we will make sure, if there is evidence, we will make sure our acute provider is making that provision if they can, as such. It will be down to the acute provider to make that actual decision. Yeah.
Okay.
Because what we do is we commission services. We don't necessarily manage the estates as such. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'm finished, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for that nice presentation. As Clyde mentioned earlier on with the previous item about the redevelopment of Royal Berkshire Hospital, it may be sensible to reconsider after the redevelopment of Royal Berkshire Hospital is confirmed. especially as you now looking at other sites, it could well be that the site, and I think it's touched on a little bit there when Clive said, if you don't find anywhere else, where do you put it? You put it back into where it is now. I think it would have been good in hindsight if the Battle site had not have been sold off. But that's a long time ago, and I spent many a time in that hospital as well. So I've been around a fair bit. So I'm really asking you to do that. I think that's a sensible way forward. And also a reminder that there's so much mention of cost of everything. But really, we should be looking at the benefits here, which I think you kind of touched upon. But that's getting lost a bit here, I think. The benefits of this, with some colleagues have mentioned about the benefits of this treatment. And it may be beneficial on some people, but some people it might not be. But I think if you've got a lot of weight to support and that kind of thing, that must be quite a nice feeling, actually, to be perfectly honest. So I'm heartened by what you're saying about it's going to continue somewhere. But what I'm really saying is, please hold firm until the redevelopment of Royal Berkshire Hospital is decided one way or the other. That would be a sensible way. I think ultimately you're going to save a lot of money as well if you do that. Because if it is a case, you can't go to us, it could well be it's a new site and you already can get it in the architect's design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Jim, over to you now. Jim Fruin, are you there?
Sorry, yeah, slow and clicking. You talk about evidence base, and I talk now as I have no background knowledge to hydrotherapy whatsoever, so this might be a bit of a naive question. If I look at the summary, the executive summary on page 18 of our minutes, it talks about a small number of patients for a limited period, normally up to 6 weeks. Yeah, if I look at page 47 on the questionnaires, it would appear that a majority of patients have used the service for over 12 months or at least over 9 months. So I think it's about 65% of patients have been using it for a longer period. That seems to indicate to me, as somebody with no background knowledge, that these are ongoing physiotherapy treatments, long term or longer term. If we've had the pool closed during COVID, what alternatives have been made for those treatments to continue? Because does that not give you an indication of other places that can be done? Or if those treatments have not been fulfilled because of COVID, does that not give us a local indication of the impacts of not supplying the service?
Caroline to be able to answer. I'm going to do it for Caroline because she was heavily involved with the questionnaire about this. Caroline, are you able to respond?
Yeah, so the service that the NHS commission from the hydrotherapy pool at RBH, so the service that the CCG commission is for individual patients up to a period of 6 weeks. And that is the standard approach that we take, because after a 6-week period, it's deemed that if they haven't shown benefit within that period, then they're sort of unlikely to beyond that. What we had in terms of the responses to the survey was a very large number of people who use the pool outside of the NHS service, and that's where the sort of the responses become quite confusing and grey in some areas, because I think it was there was some misinterpretation of our information, and perhaps our communication wasn't clear enough. But I think some people felt that we were consulting around a closure or not of the pool, but in fact we were consulting on whether we commission a hydrotherapy service, which is distinct from the pool. And of course the pool at RBH is utilised by many more different groups other than Berkshire West CCG, so they could have been using the pool for many number of months, but in a private capacity rather than through the NHS funded route. So that's why there's a difference in numbers.
And am I right in assuming that is long-term physiotherapy for certain disabilities or disadvantages?
I would assume so. There's well, some of them are. Some of them are mother and baby groups. Some of them are disability groups as well. I think, for example, the MS Society may use it, but it's very distinct and separate from what we commission as an NHS. That's something that, as a CCG, it's something that the RBH manage entirely separately, and nothing that the CCG have sort of any dealings with, really. I think they let it out because there's the capacity to do so, and they charge a nominal fee.
Okay, sorry for my confusion.
No, that's okay. But it's a good point to pick up on and clarify.
On the issue, Jim, that you made about in this COVID situation that we have, and because people can't necessarily utilise a service, you remember that actually hydrotherapy from an NHS commissioned service is just one specific type of therapy that we would offer. The physiotherapists are still continuing to offer support to those individual patients. So they might be phoning the patients up, giving them advice and guidance on the phone, doing it virtually, saying what they could be doing at home to maintain their functionality as it is at the moment.
It was more, Katie, if this was long-term treatments, because people have been using it over 12 months.
Yeah, okay.
Because there would obviously be an impact if that was suddenly turned off, which it has been within COVID. But if that's not what the NHS commissioned, then it's a bit of a moot question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go across to Rachel now, please.
Hi, I'm really pleased to hear that you're looking at where else you could commission hydrotherapy services from. I'm just wondering, it sounds like a very specialist kind of service. Are we sure that there are alternative providers there which are going to be accessible to local patients?
I can probably come in on this. I mean, yes, it's a specialist service, but actually there are private physiotherapists that already run hydrotherapy in a multitude of different pools, often in hotels, pools and things like that. I know certainly in Woking, I think some of the local physiotherapies run a service from St Anne's Manor. There's also a couple in Reading as well, and obviously on our patch we've also got, unless they've moved, is it Howard Physiotherapy, which is based in Pulsate, and they've got a hydrotherapy pool as well. So, you know, we're looking at all of these. Some of the local schools obviously have pools as well. So, you know, if you can come up with any ideas, if you know anybody who's mentioned anything to the neighbour's cat or whatever, that there's a hydrotherapy pool or service, just let us know, and we can make sure that we've already looked into that, and or if we haven't, look into that as well.
I think Pulsate closed a year ago.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up question to that? My understanding, reading the information pack, was that the hydrotherapy pool isn't a normal pool. It's heated to a much higher temperature than a normal pool would be. Are we actually saying that you can provide hydrotherapy in any swimming pool?
Do you want me to answer that, Debbie? You're quite right. The temperature is slightly higher in a hydrotherapy pool because obviously if you take it from NHS funded patients, some of these patients might be still ill as such. So some pools, if you go into yourselves, I know that I've gone into some pools and I'm freezing and wanting to get out. So they have to be a slightly higher temperature. So we have to be quite careful. Also, the facilities. So if you think about it, some of the swimming pools don't necessarily have, like, you know, you've seen swimming pools that have actually got like a wheelchair facility where they can put people in. We need to make sure that we're providing a quality services. So we need to make sure that the actual sites also have that type of functionality as well. We need to also make sure that there's effective cleansing cleaning going on. There's got to be separate changing rooms. It's quite complex. The one thing that I keep on saying, and Debbie keeps on saying to me, is I think a bit gold standard. And has anybody gone to Nirvana Spa recently? And they've done a hydrotherapy. They've got a hydrotherapy pool there as such. I think that's quite interesting. If you go in there, the water in there is a lot warmer than the actual water in the Nirvana Spa, but also the way that they've set up their hydrotherapy services with different flows of water and bits and pieces. So it's just interesting, but could be quite costly.
Yeah. Okay, so you're really looking for a pool which is unusually warm and also has wheelchair access.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you for that. And Abdul, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Kate and Debbie. I understand when you started with national guidings and also the best value for money, and on that basis, you probably decided to move it from somewhere else. But would I be right that you just mentioned NHS have evidence-based decisions? We have 279 people here using NHS, this pool here. And is that enough evidence for you to look after them? And second question is, under 2010 Equality Act, you have duty of care for those people. And you haven't mentioned how much you're likely to give the funding out. When you go to private people, there could be a difference, scenario, different prices. So I'm really concerned in getting mixed messages. You also echoed, you've got 9 different organizations which use this service. Obviously, I hope they pay for it. And if they do, so there's no problem on sort of upgrading money issues here, I can see. So I wonder if you could please give me a clear version of what's going to happen to these 279 NHS, because you have a duty of care for them. And we, as in working our resident, are really like to see a very clear transformation from A to B, rather than for them knocking on the doors and asking who can do the service for them. Thank you, Nikki.
Okay. I think Debbie's probably the best one to answer about the evidence base, being a clinician.
So we worked with the chartered physiotherapists and also did clinical research as well. And the lead for our clinical IFR process is actually a secondary care consultant. So, he speaks to his colleagues as well within the secondary care services. And as I say, he was desperate to really find any evidence that was over and above land-based. But this is obviously, as we keep reiterating, for the majority of people. And as you've heard, there are certain people, which is the reason why we are not closing the hydrotherapy services. We are making sure that those people who truly need it can still get it. I've got that. And also why, as Caroline has said, that the physiotherapists are also going to look into research as well, so that we can make this evidence-based. And I think what we haven't actually discussed at the moment is currently, and it's 217 NHS, not 279, though the other 279 were those non-NHS patients who are using it, currently those people have no service whatsoever regarding hydrotherapy. They still have access to physiotherapy. So it's, as clinicians, there's a gap, and we need to ensure that they have appropriate access to those services if it's deemed right for that patient. Even prior to COVID, the Royal Berks pool was closed, it seems, more times than it was open. So we weren't providing a good service even when it was pre-COVID and the service was fully functioning. So that's why we are looking at other sites so that we can provide that seamless care. As Nikki was saying earlier, you can't just shut one and then open another. There are people here that need to live, and we need to support them. So that's why we are looking at those other services.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Abdul. Just Adrian to go now. Adrian.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to see the CCG here. Really appreciate this. I presume this is kind of your non-chargeable time, and it's very good to talk to you. And I sincerely want to keep the communication lines open. There is something here which is, I would say, notionally relevant for the CCG, but which is a little bit off topic. I just want to introduce it very quickly. We just got an email from somebody, a nurse in the Wokingham Medical Centre, who's obviously saying, I'm heavily involved in the COVID stuff. She's worked off her feet, and Wokingham Borough Council previously said that she could park in car parks for free until the end of March, and this has been rescinded by Woking Council, is what she's saying, so that from Friday she'll have to pay to go to park and go to work. So I don't know if you can take an action, or Madeline, you can take an action to see if this is the case. But I think we should be having a partnership with the CCG, and telling people that are working up to here with COVID they can't park is not a good message at all. I don't like this.
What's your question about the hydrotherapy pool? Or where have you gone with this?
Well, I said this was a little bit off topic, because the questions have finished from my side on the hydrotherapy pool. This is about Woking Borough Council taking away, nurses' rights to park.
No, I'll stop you on that one. I will take it offline, and I will find out from Madeline how best to get that brought up.
Thank you.
Maybe we could discuss it for a couple of minutes at the end again. That would be helpful.
We can do. I mean, it depends whether we've got any answers. No use discussing it if we haven't got any answers. It's best if we can get some answers before we discuss it. But
Chair,
Chair,
just going slightly off topic, I do know that Matt Pope and Martin Sloan have done a huge amount of support with Woking Medical Centre, because Woking Medical Centre is also one of the vaccination sites. They've organised the car parking. I am quite surprised, Adrian, with what you've actually said, because I must admit, Debbie and I were actually at that site. Was it 2 weeks ago, Debbie? And we were saying, the car park, and they said actually it was offered to them at the moment. If you want, Ken, I can just generally speak with Martin Sloan, because I think it's possibly, I think there's probably something just gone awry as such. I think
it doesn't sound right to me.
He doesn't know.
Yeah. I hope it's wrong, but I wouldn't want us to affect the relationship with the CCG and during this COVID time, vaccinations, everything else.
You have been absolutely, just to put it in perspective, you as a council have been marvellous.
Yeah,
you have been absolutely marvellous in helping the CCG and the practices that are doing the vaccinations. Like, it is a big thank you. We've gone slightly off topic, Chair. I apologise. There's a big thank you from me and Debbie and Caroline for all the support that you have actually offered.
And I'd like to echo that, and to if you can just pass on your thanks to the parish councils as well. They are amazing at shepherding people around car parks in our variety of our vaccination centres, and really supporting us with halls and things. So thank you so much. It is we apologise because Katie and I were late to this meeting, because we are now redeploying our clinicians to work in 111, Royal Berks, and everywhere else we can to vaccinate people. So I do apologise we're late, but we are working for you to try and make everybody safe. But it's really appreciated what the council are doing for us. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much on that. You haven't got away yet, though, because I've got some questions as well, please. I'm quite interested in this report that was produced. It's a very thorough report, and it's got quite a lot of detail in it. It's going to take a long time to get through everything, I think, but I'm still very concerned about whether the savings you're looking for can be achieved the way you're going about it now. I don't particularly want to see this other pool service removed until you have an alternative in place. And it's no good saying things like the spa centre that you're talking about. I mean, that's mega bucks, that place, and that will never be used for public health, I would have thought. Secondly, on the report, you've got quite a few references there, which is nice because it shows me the sort of things you're looking at to get the reasoning behind whether this is a useful thing to have or not. But I was very concerned about the dates of some of this stuff. I mean, one of the earliest, if you go to page 33 of the references there, I mean, one of the earliest ones is 1996, I think, a report was done. And you can't really be using this to work out how effective that is in this day and age against Ruth, I think it was arthritis, was it? Yeah. And I think the most modern report you had was about 2014. That was the one, water-based exercise for adults with asthma. So these references are all interesting, but it doesn't inspire me with confidence to see you're using such old data and old references to get there. So
Yeah,
I was so pleased that when you said that you're actually going out to get more current information, because that would just be so much more relevant and show whether there is a need for it or not.
Yeah, and I think, sorry to interrupt there. So Ken, you're totally right, and I think we found it quite shocking that actually nobody had spent any time researching this, you know, and truly that is all the evidence that is out there. Because no recent evaluation has been done, which is why, you know, we were saying to the physios, you know, do you know of anything else? Can you actually do some research yourselves to look into this? So, as you say, it is really quite shocking that nobody's kind of looked at it in more recent years to get more evidence for us.
And I suppose the other thing was the bit about you need to find a place to send people to before we close down the one we've got. You added in it was unreliable. That's probably because no one's willing to spend money on it because they're not sure of its future. So I'm sure that when it comes to reliability, that could always be fixed should the need arise. I also noticed on the online responses, now, there were 35 P addresses which were used more than once to submit a survey. That's not a bad thing. The way the internet normally records the IP address is through the router that it's going through, the connection point to the internet. So you could have 20 or 30 machines and people on the other end of that router, which is actually doing the responses to the survey that you're doing. The only way to find out for sure is to do a deep packet inspection, but I don't advise that. You've also got, what was this book? I'm going to go to this book. Yeah, I've covered, I think, nearly all the points I wanted to make. You're still going to incur the cost of about 50k for land-based therapy. And if you're saying you're also going to keep the water therapy going, I think you're going to end up with the same sort of figure. At the end of it, you'd still be spending the amount, so it may actually be a full saving as well. I think that was all the main key things that wasn't asked that I wanted to get put through. So, with that in mind, thank you very much. If you can keep in touch with us and keep us up to date with what is happening, we will always be interested to listen and discuss. So can I thank you all for your time on that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, can we go?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just start late. You're on time. It's not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, we're going back to the agenda now, and we have the update from the item 43, Health Watch. Nikki, is Nick there?
Nick's unfortunately had to leave the meeting, so I will quickly go through the papers. So in the agenda, you'll see the response that Healthwatch received from the CCG regarding their review on the GP website. And that's set out on page 89 through to 91. So 91 has an action plan of the actions that the CCG are going to take in response to that review. And then also included, you will notice the perinatal mental health support experiences review that Healthwatch did, and their final review report. So if members have any questions about that information, if you could please give them to me, and then I can obviously pass them back to Healthwatch and get you written responses.
I don't directly have any questions. Are there any questions out there? I can see Adrian's got his hand up. Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Ken, for today, and thanks, Madeline, as always. Really appreciate this. I think we've had a really, really excellent meeting where we've learnt lots. But obviously, it's disappointing that we didn't get the Healthwatch update. I'm always interested in them, their updates, and I always want to ask questions of them. So hopefully, Madeline, we can get them in a slot in the future, and we can have a fuller discussion with them.
Well, Madeline can always pass on the questions if there's any that come to mind on this, and get an answer for you. So we can do that, or like we say, we wait till they come back.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather do that because I'm an interactive person. I do Q&A rather than writing. And I do apologise, Ken. I do apologise, Mr. Chairman, interrupting. But I saw this update on the WhatsApp, and I thought, the CCG, let's try and foster a good relationship with these guys. And if there's a blip with the parking, this would have been really the wrong message.
Was this a message that came from Wokingham, or was it someone?
There is a copy of an email from one of the other councillors, which is from a nurse who's working at Woking Medical Centre, who's been told that her expectation of parking until the end of March, I believe, with Woking Borough Council has been rescinded, and that from Friday those rights will be taken away. But I understand that the CCG are going to talk to Mr. Sloan about this. Perhaps you would have a comment, Clive.
Yeah, I was aware last week that we were actually putting tickets on some people in who were parking by the Bradbury Centre. This was stopped, and I think the tickets were rescinded, as far as I understand. And there was a process put in place where there were so many spaces, I understand, for people who were going there to get vaccinations. So I am a little bit surprised that we've suddenly changed our tack. And I think really it is something for you, Ken, to really try and get hold of tomorrow and say, this isn't the right thing, because I think all of us on this committee would actually be horrified that suddenly there isn't any parking spaces for somebody who is being vaccinated, and there definitely needs to be, because we are still vaccinating people who are 70 or plus.
Could I make a suggestion?
80 plus.
Yeah, please do.
Could I suggest, Councillor Mather, that you send the information to me, then I can obviously provide it to Katie so she can then follow it up fully with Martin and come back with an answer to obviously what the situation is.
Yeah, I think it's fairly swift decision within the council, really, to tell the traffic wardens that this got to stop.
It may be accidental, I'm not sure. Madeline, yes, if you could do exactly that, but we don't want to wait till next meeting. If you could just email it out to myself.
No, that's fine. As I say, if you provide me the information, I can then pass it on to CCG, who can then have those discussions and find out what the situation is.
Great, then I know whose foot to go out and stamp on when I
I mean, it would be a tragedy if somebody who's vaccinating our population is getting a parking ticket. I think that's dreadful, really dreadful.
Or expected to pay for it themselves.
Yeah. No, if they're saving our residents from dying, we should give them somewhere to park.
Yeah, I think we should. Can I make another point, Ken, about Health Watch? We always seem to come to them late in the meeting.
Yes.
Would it not be a good idea to bring them up to the front or make them the second item that we are considering, rather than always leave them to last? Because I think that's possibly a little unfair.
I don't know why they always appear last, actually, but they always do. Madeline, why is that? Is it something we decided on, or is it?
No, on this occasion it was just...
Sure, sometimes it's very useful if they can hear all this evidence coming through, they can comment on. So it's sometimes very useful, Clive.
I wondered whether it was Jim that originally asked to be last because he likes sitting through the meeting.
We can certainly review it. But on this occasion, it was requests of the other presenters about their location on the agenda. But I appreciate the comment about them being far down the agenda, and we will look to leave them off in future.
Sorry, one final point. I really agree with Abdul because I know when Health Watch has spoken, they always like to listen to what the CCG, what RBH is saying first. So, yeah, I agree with Abdul.
I guess it depends who is turning up. Jim Shockley has always been prepared to do that for a number of years. Possibly not the case tonight.
Yeah, it's a shame we've missed him tonight. He obviously had something to go to, or got too hungry, you know. All right, look, let's move on now then to the forward programme. If we have a look at this, well, I'll hand over to Madeline on this.
Okay. So you will have noted from my previous correspondence that the meeting in 17th of February is cancelled because, as you heard earlier in the meeting, the CCG are being redeployed around the system, so they don't really have the time to do a whole meeting. So that will be delayed. So it will move basically to be scheduled section. The March meeting is, you've currently got an update on the work of the Woking Borough Wellbeing Board, and then you have the kind of what I would say the general public health item, self-harm related to hospital admissions in 15 to 19-year-olds, CAMS and suicide prevention. That's a pretty big item in itself. And then obviously Health Watch, so we could look to have Health Watch first in the agenda. Obviously just bear in mind that if the situation with COVID is as it is now, by the time we get to March, we may have to reconsider the position about whether we can have public health at that meeting. But I would suggest, unless obviously members want to take anything off the list, that you don't add anything to the March meeting because it's already quite busy, but obviously it's up to you as a committee.
Agreed. Thank you, Madeline, for that. Anyone else got an opinion, or are they happy to go with that?
I'm very happy to go with Madeline's comments, but in addition, I would say that we still have, I believe, an outstanding request to understand the dentistry and to get their opinion. I understand that this is not a pure, simple case of withdrawal of service by some of the dentists. There are all sorts of complications with COVID and costs. And everything.
Can I just say again, if you turn over the page, you'll find on the other side we've got currently unscheduled topics, and we've added dental services there, so it can't escape. But I think it will probably be one of the later meetings. Probably it's not where we get that. And
I just wanted to reiterate the request because I was talking to a resident and they were talking about dentistry again. So it's good it's on the list, but I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware that I want it on the list again.
Exactly. These items that appear on the unscheduled topics, they stay there until the committee decides that they come off, or we have, of course, that particular thing happen. All right.
Thanks,
so safe. All right. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending the meeting. It was a rather interesting one this week. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have as well, and I'll see you all at the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Take care.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Madeline. Thank you, Ken. Always,
good night, everyone.
Always enjoyable.
Always something